welcome back to Kim Reads. We continue with Phantom, now on Eric's point of view, 1840 to 1843. I remember it was pitch black the night I ran away from my home in Botcherville. There was no moon, and as I pushed through the dense undergrowth in the birch and pine forest of Brumaire, clumps of nettles stung my hands. I wasn't usually so clumsy, but tonight my head was clouded with a haze of laudanum, and I stumbled and fell several times. The wound beneath my rib cage had begun to bleed again. With the exertion, I was aware of the warm stickiness seeping once more beneath my shirt, but I did not stop. I only pushed on, as though my life depended on this headlong, desperate flight, without knowing or whither I fled. I was not afraid of the dark anymore. I had long since learned to love the kindly veil and shield me from hating eyes. I had become a creature of the night, passing unseen through the shadows of the woods, absorbing the wonderful mysteries of nature, while those who lived harsh daylight slept easy and ignorant in their beds. I was nocturnal as a badger, and like a badger, I knew my only enemy was man. There was no plan, no coherent thought in my head, just this deep instinctive need to get away, far, far from my mother's house. Sasha's death has shown me that my mother would never be safe while I continued to lie beneath her roof. As I lay drugged on the sofa, I realized there was two alternatives before me. I would let them shut me away in that terrible place for mad people, or I could run away. I chose to run. While the dawn came, I found a stream where I could drink and build myself a shelter of branches and frosted leaves. It was no palatial edifice, hardly the work of a great architect, but it shut out the knifing winds of the freezing Norman spring. When it was finished, I crept inside and lay through my several risings and settings of the sun. I was exhausted enough to have slept through the pain of my body. It was the pain in my mind that kept me awake, the pain of words which cut deeper than any metal blade. Freak of nature, monstrous burden, place where you can forget. I thought of my mother. A dreadful clarity of vision showed me her relief at finding me gone, and I pictured Dr. Barrier consoling her in his eminently sensible and practical fashion, while privately congratulating himself on this astonishing piece of good fortune. She was free now. They would go to a place where no one knew her, where she could forget me and be happy. I wanted her to be happy. She was so beautiful when she smiled at the statue of the shepherd boy. That's why I made it sing for her, so that she would be happy and smile and not want to send me away to the asylum. I never meant to make her mad. When she first began to rock the empty cradle in the attic bedroom, I was afraid that she, too, might be sent to that terrible place of which she had told me. So I made everyone else go away instead. Father Mansart, Dr. Barry, Mademoiselle Perrot. I made them all disappear one by one. I could make anything disappear if I really wanted to. Anything except my face. Even in the earliest memories, my mother was always cold and remote, like a distant, beautiful star, always beyond my reach. I think I was born knowing that I must not touch her, but it was a long time before I understood the reason for her revulsion and hatred. Even when she dragged me in the front of the mirror and showed me my face, I did not at first understand. I thought the horrendous thing in the glass was some nightmarish creature sent to punish me for my disobedience. And for a long time I was afraid to remove the mask in case it came back to haunt me. The truth came to me slowly, and with the dawn of realization, I developed an irrational fascination for mirrors. As I began to play with the cool, unfeeling pieces of glass, I learned that they could be warped and manipulated, made to show others an illusion of the sort of nightmare they showed me. My preoccupation with illusion made my mother angry. She said it was a sick fancy, and that if I did not conquer it and turn my thoughts to God, I would most certainly end as a madman. I was always being told to turn my thoughts to God, as though I were some especially wicked creature with more than one mortal's fair share of original sin. In point of fact, I was perfectly devoted and dutiful little Catholic, until I learned that animals have no souls. I have no memory of what took place once that dreadful revelation had been made to me. I do not know what I did to make Father Manzart decide I must be exorcised. It must have been something bad. I only know that after the grim ceremony took place, I discovered that I hated the priest, and I hated God too. God who denied an afterlife to my only friend. Why should hateful men have souls when my precious Sasha was condemned to be eaten by worms, returned to clay as though she never existed? I cannot bear to be told that when we parted it would be forever. Sasha, as far as back as I could remember, she'd always been there, a warm, comfortable, welcoming presence who never turned from me. She looked upon my face without its mask and licked my bare cheek with her rough tongue. She let me kiss her mouth, soft head, and sometimes when I was working, she would push her nose into my hand and demand to be caressed. When I looked at her lying at my feet with her beautiful golden fur all matted with dirt, I swore to be revenge upon the whole human race for this crime that my faith considered unworthy of the confessional. I learned how to hate the night Sasha died. It was the first time I felt that mindless lust for blood, the uncontrollable, instantaneous urge to kill and kill and kill. The first time, but not the last. It was bitterly cold beneath the bed of leaves, and my trembling breath left little clouds in the damp air. In the stiff whitened grass behind my head, I noticed a spider weaving in a purposeful way. Mademoiselle Perrault was afraid of spiders. I had put one on her shawl once, a particularly large and ugly specimen, not unlike the one I saw her now, and her scream of fright had been awesome to hear. My mother was not afraid of spiders, but she hated them all the same. She hated all unlovely, ugly creatures. Whenever I saw a spider in the house, I would rescue it before she got the chance to squash it with her broom. Sometimes I used to dream I was a spider, scuttling in a terrifying search for some dark hole where no hating human could find me. I used to dream of spinning a great sticky web that would swallow all the people who threw stones through our windows and shouted ugly things. In the dark, I would slip out along a thread of silk and gloat over helplessness before paralyzing them with one single bite. I have thought that I would have been quite happy as a spider. Even a spider has a right to mate. Hunger drove me at length from my shelter, forcing me to push on through the densely wooded area. Walking by night and sleeping by day, an ironic quirk of fate had blessed me with astonishing powers of recovery, and the knife wound was now healing to a crushing brown wheal, which encouraged me to discard Dr. Barrier's bandages. The prompt treatment had prevented infection. He probably saved my life, but I did not see it as a thing I should be grateful for. Indeed, there were times when I came to hate him more now for that single act of pity than anything else. I was vaguely aware that the forest would bring me out on the road to Cantilou. My instinct was to hide from people, but challenged by growing need for food, the instinct was growing weaker by day. My clothes were torn and filthy, clinging to me like a damp rag after so many nights spent sleeping on the ground. But that discomfort was lost beside my ravening hunger. I was not accustomed to hunger. In her half-crazed insistence that I should eat and not remind her of a starving skeleton, my mother had constantly set before me an obscene procession of dishes. Food was forced upon me like a punishment. It was as though she had sought to atone for some past neglect in this respect that filled her with perpetual guilt. I developed sleight of hand at an early age, simply as a means of conveying this unwanted food to Stasha beneath our table, and I often thought of heaven as a place where no one would need to eat again, but that was before I truly understood what it meant to starve. I had nothing but water for kneeling or weak, and I was lightheaded with a desperation that was driving me steadily into the inhabited world. When dark darkness fell once more, I left the shelter of the forest and ventured out in the open road, where a blaze of winking lights beckoned welcomely. Lights meant people, and where there were people, there was also food that might be stolen. I stumbled on until I reached an encampment of tents and caravans, pitched on a broad patch of common land and backed by the deeper mass of the forest. Gypsies. I knew very little about these mysterious people, and what I knew was mostly bad, gleaned from snippets of conversations between my mother and Mademoiselle Perrault. They were heathen masses, according to my mother, and that was the worst crime imaginable. They stole children, particularly children who did not either suffer. This was last with a hard look at me. They were vagabonds, unwashed, and unprincipled ruffians who never should be permitted to sell near decent folk. Gypsies were like spiders, then. My mother did not like them, and I, in consequence, felt a sneaking comradeship with such social outcasts. Even so, I was wary and fearful of discovery as I crept into camp. A group of horses had been tethered to a post on the inner ring of the settlement, and their warmth and beauty momentarily swayed my purpose. I reached up instinctively to caress one smooth, velvety nose, and that was my undoing. For the horse whickered nervously at my unfamiliar touch, and once a restlessness passed through the peaceful, tethered animals. Instantly a dog began to bark, and a man's voice cried out an angry warning that someone was meddling with the horses. Suddenly lanterns came at me from all sides. Instinctively I dropped to the ground and hid my face in my arms, bracing myself against anticipated blows. I was grabbed by the shoulders and dragged along the frosted, leaf-molded floor to the enormous campfire which flickered and glared against the clear spring night. And there I was flung at the feet of a small man with a jet black mustache and a single gold ring dangling from one ear, who prodded me ungently with his foot. "Get up," he demanded coolly. I scrambled to my feet, looking around frantically for some form of escape, but I quickly saw that I was surrounded. "Do you know what we do with thieves?" the man demanded. "Little thieves who won't show their thieving faces? We roast them like hedgehogs." And then he leaned forward and pulled me closer to his swarthy skinned face. "Then we eat them." I saw no reason to disbelieve this threat, and I gasped before was greeted with loud bells of delightful laughter. "Better show us your face, hadn't you?" continued the man. "We don't want to finish on the campfire." I clutched hold of the mask with defiant terror, unaware of the curious anticipation on every face that was rosy-hued by the firelight. "Oh, let him go," said a woman in a gaudy colored skirt. "Poor little devil, looks like he's starving. Look at his arms, they're like sticks. Give him some food and let him go. He's not done any harm after all." "How do we know he's done no harm?" I heard a man shouting. "We don't trust Gorgios, do we? Sneaking Gorgio? What was he doing around the horses? I say turn out his pockets and see what he's stolen for us. And take off the mask." "Yes, take off the mask." The cry was taken up like a chant. I was passed around from one hand to the other, struggling all the time to hold on the mask. "Take off the mask, dearie, and let's have a look at you." Fingers were fumbling at my temples, and I began to scream and kick wildly. "No, please, don't, please." "Listen to that. A gentleman's manners, if you don't mind. Is he a Bourbon prince who's missed his tumbril?" The laughter was growing louder and wilder all around me. "Got blue blood, have you, dearie? How shall we open a vein and find out?" My arms were pinned behind me, and I strained violently to free myself. A strong hand came down beneath my chin and tore the mask away. And suddenly there was a deathly hush, broken again only by a single Romany O. In that terrible silence, I saw them all staring at me, on their faces a mixture of expressions ranging from utter disbelief to fear. "Let me go," I whispered faintly. "If you let me go, I promise I won't come back." They were closing in on me, like wolves in a pack. I saw the flash of night in the firelight, and I screamed, for I suddenly knew that it was all to be endured again, the mindless violence of an angry, unreasoning mob. Then everything went to black, and I knew no more of what they did to me that night. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. Thanks for listening.